This conference will now be recorded.
We have 3 of 5, so yes, I think we do. But we don't need a quorum to just discuss parklets, though, so we should be good. Okay, I'd like to call to order the February 9th, 2022 meeting of the Tenino Planning Commission. Let the record show that all commissioners are present with the exception of Dave Watterson and Corey Mounts. Okay, so we have minutes from our December meeting and our January, I think that's January, yeah, January 12th meeting. Let's take a look at those, and then we'll approve this agenda and move forward with the meeting.
For the December minutes, I have a question. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
When it comes to the minutes for the minutes approval within these, it looks like there's no motions recorded. A motion or in a second.
Yeah, you're totally right. We're having some issues with the Muni code giving me access to do things. So when I do it, Ronna has to go in and approve it, and it's a whole mess. So that's why we didn't have them last time she was on vacation. I will fix that. I apologize.
Well, I guess let's hold off then, unless you just, we can approve them conditionally with, you know, that they put those motions in there. Does that sound good, Erin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll move to approve the December minutes and the January minutes with the note that they'll be updated with the motions.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then let's take a look at the agenda. It's pretty simplistic, so.
So moved.
Did you make a motion? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll move to approve.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Doesn't look like we have any members of the public present, unless, Robert, do you have anything you want to say, or you're just waiting for the parklet discussion?
Just waiting for the parklet discussion.
Okay, sounds good. Looks like we probably don't have any mayor's reports or anything from the council. Jen or Dan?
Nothing from the mayor.
Yeah, I don't have anything really either. I know that the bid for the Corey house is going up this week. It's going out for bid, so that's exciting. Nice. The Corey pool, I think, is starting real soon. I know they're moving the park playground toys.
So it's definitely happening this year. That's good. That's good news.
Yeah, it's good news. They're starting on it in the next 2 weeks. They'll be in the grassy area, and I know the pump track has also been now for sure is going in the park, not in the triangle. And yeah, that's what's moving along here.
Okay, sounds good. We don't have a public hearing tonight, and we don't really have any unfinished business. So I guess, Dan, you can take us into our discussion of parklets.
Sure. Thanks. And this topic was requested by the mayor to have the planning commission chat through parklets and streeteries. I guess there's at least one business in downtown Tenino to convert a portion of the street front into a seated area. So I believe the mayor and council are kind of looking for a planning commission to weigh in on whether they would recommend developing or allowing that either as a temporary use or preparing an ordinance. So what I'd like to do tonight is show you what some of the other cities in our area, in our state, I should say, are doing. As far as in our area, I know Olympia has an ordinance that addresses parklets and streeteries. It sounds like the chief might be able to talk to some of those too, you know, if familiar with those. And I'm sure the rest of you have been into, you know, the Olympia area and seen these, or maybe even in Tacoma, Seattle, or elsewhere. So what's the context? What do people know about parklets and streeteries? Are those foreign terms altogether?
Are we talking about seating like in the parking area, kind of like a la Olympia, where they have restaurant seating, like physically where a car would have parked previously? Is that what we're talking about?
Yep, I believe that's what we're talking about. So
okay.
And then
go ahead,
a streetery is just where they kind of like close down a street and then use the entire street as pedestrian area. Is that a streetery?
So not quite. Let me define the terms, and at least the way that they are currently working. Tenino can call them whatever we want to call them. But here's the Seattle Department of Transportation Parklet Handbook. It is 50 pages. That I think says to the concern about what you might expect from a safety and use standpoint, as well as, hey, it's Seattle, right? They're gonna have a pretty high level of regulation and oversight for that. So that's just a little bit of context. 50 pages all the way from, you know, how to design these technical things and how to build them, and then what to do in the meantime, what happens if the business turns over, just all of those different pieces. Here's an example of one right here. Looks like kind of a neighborhood that has taken one over. And let me show you the Spokane version of the frequently asked questions, just so we can get at the definitions right away. So what is a parklet? I'll read this just for the record. A parklet is essentially a temporary constructed public space installed in a parking spot or loading zone. Here's the key. Parklets are free for the use of everyone, visitors, residents, and businesses. They are installed for the warmer months and removed for the colder part of the year. And I think this is Spokane, so, you know, take that for what it's worth. They have real winners. Other places I've seen them be installed for a long time. What is a streetery? A streetery is much like a parklet, but it's reserved for the use of the adjacent cafe or restaurant during their business hours. Just like a sidewalk cafe, but not on the sidewalk. When the business who maintains a streetery is closed, it works just like a parklet and it's free for everyone to use. So that's the key difference. A parklet is public use. Even if it's next to a restaurant, if it's out there, I can go sit there, I can drink my coffee. I don't have to order the coffee from the cafe. I can just sit there as long as I want, like I was sitting on a city park bench. A streetery is reserved for the use of that adjacent business, and during operating hours, it's only for business, customers to use. When the restaurant or the use closes, then it reverts to a public, free for everyone to use. So that is kind of the key difference. Any questions on those two?
I have a question. So
yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So and it just popped to my head, but a streetery and a parklet. So would, if a establishment was okayed to sell beer, wine, or spirits, would their licensing extend into the streetery but not a parklet? And I'm sure that's been addressed in, or maybe I'm jumping the gun here.
Good question.
Good question. Let's see what the city of Spokane says about that. So they say that their draft ordinance right here states that as long as a business who owns and maintains a streetery has a liquor license and it complies with the laws, it can serve alcohol. So that's what their ordinance says. I'm sure different ordinances say different things, but that's what Spokane says. So that's the streetery, right? That's like the sponsored parklet, if you will. That's the one that's outside the business, that's open during, business hours. I don't think you could consume alcohol in a parklet, because that's like sitting on park bench in the city park and drinking something, that, you know, that would be an open container issue, I would assume.
Okay.
Let me show, so we've got kind of a frame of reference. We kind of understand a little bit what the parklet is and what the streetery is. And let's look at some pictures. I think that at least that helped me think through what that would be. So let me see if I can make sure what, I think that's it, right? That's probably as good. This, I don't know where all these are. This one's in Redmond. Not all of them are straightforward, but you can see here that there's a car parked here. It's parallel parking. There would be another stall here. There's a set of curb stops out in front and on the side. And then it's got some, I don't know, 4x4s, whatever those might be, timbered members with lights hanging from it. And it's clearly out in the middle of the, what would be the parallel parking stall. So that's a streetery. Here's another one, a little bit more, this looks like Wenatchee to me. Anybody know where this one's at? We should play this fun little geographic game. These are all Washington, so any guesses?
Leavenworth?
Leavenworth?
Yes, good guess.
Good one.
That's too easy. There's no Krampuses though, so it's hard to really track that. I don't know if you heard about the Krampuses. Anyways, here's another Leavenworth one. That's pretty rough. Here's a good one. I think this might be
Ballard.
Go ahead. Yeah, I think this is Ballard Locks area. There's actually a bunch in Ballard. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I've been up there a few times. So aesthetically, there is no difference between them. It's more who takes care of it and what kind of uses it gets. So they pretty much look the same.
Yeah. So we'll come back to this. I don't know how much people are interested in the actual construction type, but you know, the curb face is what, like 3 inches, I think, or so, something like that, between the sidewalk and the gutter. And you can see this one. You see my mouse? I can't tell. This one's built up to the edge of the curb. So how does that happen? Well, there's a process for that. And as you might imagine, Seattle covered the construction techniques, because there's a gutter that's supposed to carry stormwater. If you stick a cinder block in it to hold up the members and you're blocking the gutter, now you're gonna have stormwater, you know, concerns. So that's covered as well.
Do we have to discuss this with DOT since it's a state highway or state route, or is it something that we can just do?
That's a great question. The best I can answer that, I think we should consult it with DOT. That's a fair comment. When I've looked through the regs for how to regulate Sussex as it goes through City of Tenino, which is an incorporated city, as you know. When state highways go through incorporated cities, the cities are in charge of the access and kind of at least the access points they're in charge of. I don't know about crosswalks and hawk beacons and parklets and streeteries and those other things. So right. I just that when it enters into the city property, a lot of the responsibility reverts to the jurisdiction. So
I have a question too.
Sure.
Relating to liability, if it's on the street where cars would park, I'm wondering if there's additional liability to the city, if it would maybe be a parklet, or if it was a streetery, would it be the restaurant's responsibility, or how that might look?
Yeah. So do you mind if I park that for a moment? I think the liability question is a good one and it needs to be discussed. Let me run through a few more pictures and then let's bounce over to where that's covered in more detail. Okay. I'm not obviously a streetery or a parklet expert, so I'm relying on what a couple years worth of task forces in both of those cities, Spokane and Seattle, have wrought. So if I can rely on those, I'd like to. But I do think there's leeway for Tenino to adopt its own ordinance if they desire. So that can I do that, Aaron?
Oh, of course, yes.
So I think we'll come. Here's another one. I can't tell by looking at these in general. This one looks like a streetery because it's got a padlock on those cabinets in there. I think that'd be pretty hard pressed to be public. Although it does say public parklet, at least this one. There's another one. That one's clearly a bit more temporary, probably pop up pretty easily. I think this is back in Ballard. Edmonds. This is pretty common. There's some stuff in downtown Olympia that it looks like this, you know, the corrugated plastic with a around a frame. I think we might be getting towards the end here, so probably some of the last streeteries. I think that one's in Spokane and western part of the town, and another Spokane. So this one's on the, you know, this one's on the sidewalk, taking up a bunch of the sidewalk, not necessarily in the street. Same here. All right, so those are some pictures. Let's any questions in any of those? Anyone that you want to go back to and make an observation, or should we press on?
Say we press on.
Okay, so here's the, let me review some of these things in Spokane, because the paying for the construction's interesting. In none of these examples did I see that the city was spending its own money to construct these parklets or streeteries. So it really is incumbent upon businesses, residents, or local groups to do this. Again, I think there's a proposal or an interest in a few of the businesses in downtown Tenino doing it, and so that would need to be made clear to them that space, which is public, would have to be constructed by that individual. So
why would a business want to pay to build it if they weren't going to have control over it? So like, why would they want to build a parklet if they could build a streetery and have, you know, more say over what happens? And
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that's what would happen. So, you know, the restaurant would build it for their own purposes. I think that when you see a parklet is like a neighborhood situation, or out in front of City Hall, or, you know, something like that. I think you're right.
And just, I mean, to chime in as I'm kind of processing this, like, yeah, it seems like the streetery, since that is like someone expanding their business, you know, they're paying. Do they pay like an annual fee for that space, or how does that work? Okay.
Yeah. So both the city of Spokane and Seattle have like pretty decent fees for the annual licensing of this, and the licensing includes, you know, when you apply for the license for a streetery, for example, you have to submit your plans, and I'll show you a couple plan sheets for what that looks like, but your plans have to match up with the ordinance requirements. Totally. Okay. So yeah, so they're building it out with their own money, you know, kind of like a beer garden or something else like that. And so they recognize it's a temporary space, but they're doing it for the purposes of it increasing A, the visibility of their business, and B, the carrying capacity.
Yep, the desirability. And then
people are tapped out on spaces. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of what I just said. Like this question is, what if a business owner or tenant doesn't want a parklet or a streetery in front of their business? Anyone proposing to install one of those has to apply for a permit and comply with the requirements for both notification and design. So getting to a roundabout answer to Aaron's question about liability, because it's privately constructed and has a permit, the liability is on that business owner. I mean, there's a certain amount of liability on the city to get the ordinance right, to regulate the use, because if the ordinance is patently unsafe, right, then the owner who applies for and builds this streetery can say, look, I built it to code and everything, and it's still something bad happened, and it's your fault because you should have anticipated that, right? So there's always going to be a little bit of sharing. That's just me kind of talking off the top of my head, but I would, the predominant amount of liability is going to go on the user, that restaurant owner, the cafe owner. So here's the one of the designs of one, and you can see how they're detailing out wheel stops and safety elements like a DuraPost, and maintaining drainage. We'll look at that in a minute. But this is how they're doing it. They're carving out a space for this streetery. ADA compliance, easily removable, only on streets with grade no greater than 5%. Here's some kind of cool details. At least I like these. You can see that. So this is the parklet, the little kind of pinkish red color in here. And here's another good example. You can see how it's gapped, and that's for stormwater purposes. That's to allow the rain to run off and run into the storm drain, which in these cities is, against that face of the curb on the street service. It's the same here, that there's a gap in between each of those. You can kind of see the gap over here. I don't know if you can see the hand here, but right in here, you can see a gap as it sits up against that curb face.
So I did have one question as I'm thinking about this. So would we be able to define a specific stretch within downtown where this would be allowed? I mean, I can imagine there are probably some places where we would rather try to, allow for this than others.
Yeah, I believe that parklets and streeteries are not allowed on every street in these cities.
Right. So there's just designated zones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
And I think if you consider these uses, that you would, be mindful of those issues. I mean, there are a few streets in Tenino that are probably better suited to these types of uses than others. And I think it's a fair discussion to have of whether Sussex is the right street for it, based on the traffic and, the type of traffic that goes through there, or maybe these are more appropriate on a side street.
Right.
Or some of those, the challenge with some of those is the surfacing is not always even, right? So it's a bit tough to figure out how to get everything square so people aren't rocking around, because you are taking a little bit of risk if you're setting these up and they're all rickety and people are slipping and sliding all over the place.
Right. Yeah, I could even see a portion of Sussex, downtown, might even be a spot that would be more appropriate than maybe, east or west a little bit more.
Dan, have you ever had a chance to look at the Highway 507 improvements that we did during Fred Evander's tenure? It's probably on a bookshelf somewhere in City Hall, would be my guess. But one of the things, in addition to potential roundabout locations, as discussed in there, are bump outs, like traffic calming bump outs on the. Seems like something like that would go really well with this concept, especially with, like I can see, like, if two logging trucks passing each other going opposite directions, and people are trying to eat, it's going to be kind of scary, maybe even if we were in downtown Sussex sitting at like a table trying to eat or something like that. It might be intimidating without any like barrier. I guess it's not a huge barrier, but just to make it a little more pedestrian friendly at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's right. I guess a thought I have about that is, you know, the business owner is going to figure out what works for them and their use, and the patrons are going to share with them, you know, what they like and what they don't like about the streetery,
Sure.
for example.
Right.
And the ones down in downtown Olympia off of like Capitol and Columbia that I've seen, they're almost like full height deals. So there's a lot of weather protection and a lot of protection from the traffic that's going by, because it's like a 4-lane section. Like Capitol and Columbia are, you know, got 2 lanes each directions, screaming by. So I think the ADT, that the vehicle traffic on Sussex, if we're considering parklets and streeteries, that's probably the safety and the vehicle traffic's the number one concern.
Right.
On a
I was thinking if we were going to approach DOT with a discussion about these, then might be an opportunity to bring up some of that stuff that we had wanted before. It seemed like, I don't know.
Right. The bulb outs are already painted, right? I mean, they're kind of a faux bulb out.
Right, but you know, put in a curb, maybe a street tree or something that would be, you know, more traffic calming.
Right, and I think if you look at a lot of these photos, they appear to be lower traffic routes.
Right, right.
This one's even a one-way, for example. So when you regulate something like this, you know, it's typically things you try to be flexible to start out, and then you start getting presented with all these scenarios, and they're like, well, what about this? And then you're like, well, yeah, I guess we should have figured that out. And then you end up regulating for all these things to control it, because otherwise what people will say, you know, the businesses and proprietors will say, nothing says I can't do it that way, right? So that's why the city of Seattle has a 50-page manual on how to do this. So that's what you have in front of you. What other questions do you have? I kind of showed you a little bit of some diagrams. You kind of have a sense of how these might get built, some dimensional requirements. You know, there's like a high control, high touch, high maintenance approach to doing this. There's probably a less strict, more flexible ordinance. Temporary use, we could do it as a temporary use for 90 days at a time. The code allows that already. There's temporary use provisions.
I have a question. Would it be like, how does it work if the place that wants to put this in, their only parking is in front of their business on the street? I mean, is there a limit to that? Like, do they have to provide other parking for their patrons? Because I know that this particular business has a parking lot across the street that another business owns, and they are not happy with people parking there. So that's what concerns me, that that's going to cause a little, you know, beef between businesses or something.
Yep, for sure. I think I can understand that. It's a public street.
Right.
And it's there's no dedicated and designated parking. So it might be impolite, but it's not against, you know, it's not illegal.
To just pave
But
that
as we move
lot
forward,
behind the sandstone. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
Oh no, you're good. So I was going to say, just as we move forward, though, we could also, you know, possibly look at, you know, some regulations on how many per block, or, I mean, there's, I don't know. I'm just thinking there's probably ways that we could, you know, make sure that we have parking.
Does Seattle in their manual have anything about what percentage of street parking can go away to accommodate a parklet or a streetery?
Let me check that real quick. I have their ordinance kind of handy, but it's not open right now. I doubt that piece would be in their little handbook here.
Yeah, I was cruising some images of different concepts, and from a safety standpoint, it looks like people have been pretty innovative with jersey barriers and ecology blocks, although it doesn't seem to be super temporary considering you'd have to have a truck to set them up. But
yeah, and I wonder, Chief, how many of those were like responses to COVID versus actual straight up parklets and streeteries?
well, I know that all of that, you had an image of Ballard Avenue East, and I spent a fair amount of time in Seattle, and that really ornate structure was Ballard, and that all popped up as a result of COVID. And I don't know this to be absolutely true, but I believe that they've enjoyed it so much that they literally eliminated all street parking in a 4-block section of Ballard Avenue East. And they've kept the parklets. I think that's Ballard actually right there also.
Yeah.
So, and then from a safety standpoint, it's obvious that there's anytime you're going to be sitting closer to the road, to the travel lane, it's just by sheer math, there's going to be an increased risk. But I wouldn't even begin to know how you would ever gauge whether that risk is appropriate or not. I don't know what that matrix or metrics looks like.
A lot of cities have started a pilot program. So like Spokane did a pilot program between April 1st and November 1st to try it out. So, and then they sunsetted it so that they could make it go away if they didn't want it to, if it didn't end up being very feasible or popular. So, but that was all pre-COVID. That was like 2017. So I think it ended up lasting.
I
So
I know
there's that option too.
I know it would simply be anecdotal that I don't know if anybody in attendance tonight's heard of a particular incident where a vehicle careens out of control into a parklet. I don't know of any data or anything that's ever come across, but I'm sure it's happened just because it's going to be a higher risk engagement just by the nature of it. But it's nothing that I've seen, or King 5 hasn't done a piece on it. So.
Chief, if you're finished, I have a question.
Yeah, sorry,
I was just
spitballing there.
okay. I didn't want to, stop you from talking if you weren't finished. I do have a question about, in regards to the liability. I would imagine that the city would want them to carry some type of insurance on that, especially with it being, on the street like that. I don't know if an insurance carrier would see that as too large of a risk or what that would cost them because of the risk, but yeah, I would think that if one could get insurance on that, it would benefit the city if they were going to allow them to do these parklets to carry some sort of policy.
I wonder if AWC's dealt with this. So many people have done this. There has to be a way to get it done. But again, I wonder if AWC's dealt with this question.
What I see here in the model ordinance from Spokane from 2017, or I should say their pilot ordinance, had an indemnity agreement between the city attorney's office and the business. So that's how they dealt with that there was just a hold harmless indemnification language that they relieved the city of any liability for that space. And then I would think that the insurance coverage would be covered by the proprietor's general liability coverage.
I guess we would have to make sure that people prove that they're insured and that their coverage is going to cover this as part of the application process, I suppose.
Well, just because you have an indemnity agreement with the business owner doesn't mean you're going to get get out of being a party to the lawsuit if something, horrible
Sure.
goes down.
Sure, but we need to make sure that there is some kind of insurance coverage coming from the business, I suppose, if we're just going to rely on an indemnification on our side.
And I think I don't know if this has been done on a state highway with the type of traffic that you see in Sussex. So I like to look for win-wins. I mean, there may be a way to establish one of these without having to have it located on the busiest street in town.
Right. Do we have traffic counts for downtown? Does anyone know that?
The state does. They probably put count tubes up on each side. I don't know them off the top of my head though, Will.
Sure.
So really, I think what the question is here is there a general, so A, do you understand, parklets and streeteries and understand how they might apply to Tenino? And B, if you do, are you ready to provide guidance to staff and insight to the mayor on whether you think these are viable and should move forward with some type of ordinance or resolution, or whether more study is needed or whether you're not comfortable?
So I would say at this point, no, I would love to look into it further and actually start to investigate. I think when done the right way, it can, provide a really cool environment to any downtown area. So
I agree. I think it would be really neat to have something like that, and would like to just investigate a little further. I'd be really interested in knowing what AWC has to say, if they've had other members do something like this, or if they've reviewed any contracts or recommended limits that the restaurant might have. I think it could be a fun idea.
I like them also. I would like to see some of our questions answered. I think the answers are probably out there because, these have been done quite a bit over the last few years. So I'm sure a lot of the wrinkles have been ironed out by other communities. I would like to see maybe if we can tie it into that 507 project somehow, but obviously that's maybe a long shot because it's dealing with DOT. It may be a little more than this would require otherwise. So.
I think it's a fantastic idea for the look of the city and overall just a win. Is there an ask of me? Is there anything I can do from a public safety or law enforcement standpoint?
I mean, I had a general question about people who you want to use the space and then enjoy it and then move on, and there's some people who just want to hang out for extended periods of time. And I don't, is that a concern that you might have, that people would just hang out in these spaces and kind of turn into as much of a nuisance as it would be a benefit?
Well, if frankly speaking, I'm shocked that Tenino. If I were in a leadership position in pretty much any one of our neighboring communities or cities, and this isn't a undercut to anybody else, I would be concerned about essentially just providing a bedroom for people. But in Tenino, that hasn't been my experience so far. That I mean, there may be a marginal case again, but those are dealt with already with our public spaces, and we've got a very, very, very small transient population, permanent transient population. So as the current state of the city, I don't see that as something that should be of any concern.
Question for the Planning Commission. What about Olympia Street? I've got an aerial here from Google that shows Olympia Street, pretty well used with looks like for a show, or that's what it looks like to me.
So I
It's
was
not-
kind of thinking about that. We've got Olympia Street, and then what's the other one kind of right next to it? My mind just went blank, that are connecting kind of the historic downtown with the park area.
Howard is
Olympia-
the next one over towards Shiplap.
Okay. Yeah, those two are kind of areas, again, that are a corridor between both the downtown and the whole park system that we have over there.
So I've got those images up well, and I mean, I think this is a no-brainer, easy sell, and way less risk on side streets. Obviously, Olympia and Howard, but even on Sussex, if I'm just thinking out loud here, a lot of those parklets that were depicted in the images are full width of a parking space, so offering essentially zero standoff from the travel lane. I don't think there would be anything preventing, maybe 2/3 that size and then using a foot of the current sidewalk. Again, I'm sure there's some math involved with that, with what is required ADA and whatnot for people to walk on the established sidewalks, but to try to mitigate some of that. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Penrose.
Yes, split the difference a little bit, right?
Yeah, and again, we're not servicing a population the size of Seattle, Ballard, Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater. I think it would be equally as effective to have a smaller, quainter version of those.
And I could see the value of trying to see if Sussex could work, since that would probably make the most sense for the businesses who are trying to utilize a streetery.
Yeah, that's the only question I have about using the side streets, is that we'll go a restaurant downtown on Sussex, walk the food over to Olympia, or are we just talking about some tables for people to eat and get carry out, and sit down at, I guess. Those would be parklets, right? Not streeteries at that point, on the side street.
Yeah, and I almost feel like the side street would be more of a way to encourage to develop those streets. But yeah, you're right. Probably immediately, I mean, the most value for any business would be right in front of their establishment, where they can serve their guests and have that kind of natural flow in and out of the building.
Olympia Street's used by the farmers market too. I mean, I think that you can see the farmers market up in the Google Maps aerial photo. So you can see all the booths up and down Olympia Street. So I don't know how the farmers market would, I'm sure they would appreciate having some tables. We just built that thing behind the library for some tables, I guess, but maybe a few more tables they would appreciate. But, since they use that street every Saturday, I don't know, we would have to get some input from them, I suppose.
And just a comment, maybe for consideration, or again, kind of talking out loud, it seems like it might be worth evaluating how close we might want those to crosswalks, since our crosswalks, we just rely on cars stopping to let pedestrians cross, and it might make it kind of difficult to see the pedestrians.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, I think there is some laws governing that. I mean, obstructed line of sight from vehicular traffic to the waiting area where a crosswalk is.
So I'm gonna summarize what I hear is there's general support. There's some underlying questions and maybe some concerns, but generally we could report back to the mayor that the planning commission is supportive of parklets and streeteries.
Yeah, I would say, I think we're absolutely interested. Just wanting to make sure that if we're going to launch it, at least try to get some of these questions, get it off to a good start.
And I think, I don't know who's expressed interest, but I know there's at least one business. So I'd like to respond in proportion to the interest level. If there's 7 or 8 businesses that want to do this, it's probably worth an ordinance. If there's one business that wants to do it, we could probably set up a temporary use permit for 90 days and
Yeah.
give them general standards and let them see if
Like
it works.
a pilot project.
Yeah. I
Sort
mean, no reason to spend a bunch of time and effort for a one-off that ends up not really being a thing.
And so here's one question, because I can.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I was just gonna say I can see definitely having some standards, that we would want them to meet, both for safety and then also for aesthetics and look. We have the 90-day option. What would we have to do in order to do a 6-month option, so that if a business wanted to do that, it would make it worth it for them to put that investment into it? I guess I'm just wondering, is a 6-month option even possible?
Yeah, I would say it's probably pretty easy to do a 90-day plus a 90-day renewal. That gets us to 180.
Okay. Months. There you go. Okay.
I think that's
I was just gonna mention that another avenue that you could use for resources is another city is Edmonds. Last time I was there, they have several of these, and not just on the main thoroughfare, but they also have a bunch on the side streets. So.
Nice. Thank you. I think one of those sites that you showed us an example of was in Edmonds, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, so I guess you'll take this back to the mayor, and what's next for this?
So I'd like to report back to him and see if he, whether he's basically talk to the business and see if they're serious about it. Let them know that there's interest, and see if we can't run it through a temporary use permit approach. We'll through that TUP we can condition the approval, the duration and the operating hours, and so I can slap together some of these existing examples from these other cities to give them a general standard. Certainly that liability, there ended up being a little bit even more liability language in that Spokane ordinance, Keeling. So there's quite a bit related to the insurance requirements, and then float that to the business and see if that's something that they want to do. That'd be my kind of approach, is maybe let's run a limited test on this to see if this is something that's got legs.
Okay.
So does that sound fair for an outcome for the meeting?
Yes, I think it sounds great.
Same.
Okay. Well, I will. I'll put that on our action item and then report back in March.
Okay. So I guess that's it for this conversation. Moving on. Discussion of the next chair and vice chair of the Planning Commission. I guess we'll probably have to wait on that till the next meeting, since Dave and Corey aren't here, but we can talk about it now if you guys want to. Do either of you have any interest in being the chair or vice chair?
Yeah, I would have interest in helping out and taking on one of those roles.
Okay. Right now I'm the chair and Corey's the vice chair, so we may as well just wait till the next meeting, I guess. Then we can vote on it, I guess.
Totally. Now, is this a position? Does it annually rotate, or
it's a good question?
Or is it more?
Historically, I think we've decided every year who's going to be the chair and vice chair. I think I've been the chair for quite some time now, and so has Corey been the vice chair. Just because historically nobody else has really been interested in doing the job, to be honest with you. But it doesn't make any difference to me either way. I don't mind continuing to chair, but if somebody else wants to step up and do it, that's fine with me too.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I don't think we're required to do anything in particular.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. Are you in traffic, Alex?
Can you hear my noisy truck? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's not leadership behavior, dude.
Yeah, you're out, dude. It's out.
I will make sure
Okay,
to add this to the next agenda, just when
yes.
everyone else. Okay.
Sounds good. That makes sense to me. So with that, I guess we don't have anything else on the agenda. Any announcements or news that we should be aware of, upcoming events? I can't think of anything in particular, but
We just got word at City Hall that STP is back on this year, so
oh,
they'll be coming back through town. Big
that's
exciting.
cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll capitalize on it a little bit more this year than we have before. That'd be nice. Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
I would say by our March meeting, we will be under contract for the housing action plan and probably under contract for the habitat conservation plan. And so I'll be bringing in March the public engagement plan for you to review, as well as potentially some existing conditions and some demographics. So the Planning Commission's really got an important role in the housing action plan. You're our main kind of stakeholder committee. I think we'll reach out to a few of those others that were on that list. I'm trying to remember, Will, if I sent you that draft that you asked for. I think I did yesterday morning.
Yeah, you sent it. I haven't had a chance to go through it yet, though. But
right. So there's a handful of people in the January meeting that the commission identified to reach out to, and once we get under contract for the HAP, we'll do that and form a little group, which will include the Planning Commission, and we'll just run them during or after these meetings.
Okay, sounds good.
I did want to say that I will not be able to attend the March 9th meeting because of an out-of-state work conference that I'll be attending.
Okay. Good to know.
We may be able to meet in person in March. I think the room should be done if we can get Rainey to put the furniture together. But the room seems pretty close, right, Jen? Or Kayleen?
Yeah, it's very close. It's pretty much done. There's a few little tiny details that we're waiting for them to finish. So we're hopeful very soon.
And I heard this morning or this afternoon, sometime today, that the governor is planning on lifting the mask mandate. So as of next week, I don't know if folks heard that.
It's a big deal.
Wow.
Okay, sounds good. I'm looking forward to the tour of the new City Hall. It should be interesting. So yeah, exciting. All right, well, with that, I guess I'll adjourn the meeting. Sounds like we'll probably determine maybe the week before if we're going to meet in person or not, but sounds like we probably will meet in person, barring any unfortunate happenstances. So yeah, I look forward to seeing everybody in person next month. Meeting adjourned.
Great. Thanks, everyone.